further ado, let her get started. Tanya, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. See if we can get that going. And oops, I need to do slideshow. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. Hello, I'm Tanya Perez, and I'm an early childhood special education teacher for the Washington County School District preschools. I'm really excited to be with you. I'm also a board certified behavior analyst, and I am really excited about our topic today and hope that some information that I find exciting and fun to use in the classroom will be inspiring for you as well. So I'd like to start out with our whys. The reason this presentation came about was that I had been thinking about my favorite teachers as I was growing up and what made them inspiring to me. And I had just made a list of all their little traits and what I could learn from them. And so I thought it might be fun if we could start just a moment. And if you just want to think to yourself about one of your favorite teachers that you were growing up, could be elementary, middle school, high school, any teacher, and try to come up with 4 words that describe why they were your favorite teacher. So not just words like, oh, she was nice, but maybe humorous, or she believed in me, or anything like that. So just think to yourself for a moment about why your favorite teacher was your favorite teacher. I'll just give you a couple seconds to think about that. And if possible, maybe write it down to the side. If we have time at the end, I would love to discuss all the reasons why and maybe things that you find inspiring. And the next, I want you to think, how would you like to be remembered as a teacher? That was the next thought that came to me as I was thinking about my favorite teacher. And then also, why did you get into the early childhood field? I'm pretty sure it was not because of the money. I'm sure you have a really great reason for being in our field. And so if you would like to remind yourself why that is, and again, at the end, I hope we can share these ideas on what's important to us. So we're going to talk about the main goal of any academic program, and that is that we have willing and happy learners. And that is really exciting to me. And the purpose of this, the goal of this presentation is, how do we get that? I know that the early childhood teachers that I work with and have seen in action in different parts of the community are people who are really empathetic, who love their jobs and love working with the children that they're working with. So we love our field, we love our kids. We want to be the inspiring teacher, we want to be the favorite teacher, and yet sometimes we're going to have to make some corrections for inappropriate behavior. So we want to find out, how can we do this in a kind and meaningful way? And we're going to talk about ways to do that. So this is kind of our objectives today. We have a lot to go through, so I'm going to kind of cruise fast. And I won't go through our objectives because they're kind of written in our description anyway. So just a little bit of self-reflection for a moment. How do you feel about working with challenging behaviors? Maybe you feel hesitant, maybe you love it, maybe you're inspired by it. And just think for a moment. For those of you out there who might feel hesitant or afraid or nervous to work with children who display some challenging behaviors, I want you to know that I started out feeling that way too, and that learning how to work with these behaviors is a skill set that you can learn. And the very best thing that happened to me was that I had a very supportive preschool team that taught me the skills that I needed to know and offered me support, and then trusted me to go on my own and do it. And they would check back with me and make sure I was okay. So I'm hoping that some of these skills that I learned might be useful to you as well. All right, so let's talk about what happened to the good old days. Do you guys remember the good old days when all the students were sitting in nice little chairs with nice little desks, and everybody was paying attention to the teacher, and it was nice and quiet in the classroom? At least that's how is sometimes remembered. We just want to decide if that really was the good old days or not. So did it really inspire lifelong learning? I was listening to a webinar the other day, and one of the people who was in the audience made a comment, and I just liked it so much. I was writing down, everything she was saying. And she just mentioned, do we want compliance robots, or do we want to create students who have skills to be autonomous and independent and self-advocating? Having them just do what you say doesn't seem to help them think for themselves or voice their opinions or their preferences, and everyone deserves that right. And so when we think about the good old days and kind of that controlling, discipline type situation that kind of was my childhood, um, we need to remember that controlling is not teaching. It's not effective teaching. And so what we're not saying as we're going through this presentation is we're not going to say that we're going to be super permissive. It's not going to swing that pendulum the other way. But we want to have some effective discipline. And I like this quote here, that effective discipline rests on clear and age-appropriate expectation, effectively communicated within a trusting relationship and a safe environment. So one of the things, if we're going to be working with behavior, is that we need to know what the purposes are for behavior. And so these are the purposes or functions. They're called the functions of behavior: attention, access, avoidance, or escape, or alone. And I'll just kind of go over those really quickly. Now, we're not going to focus a lot on the purposes for behavior. We're going to move rather quickly through it, but it's important to know what they are. So attention is to gain adult or peer attention. And also remember that reprimands is also a form of attention. So they might even be doing a behavior to get a reprimand. Access is to gain access to an item, activity, or event. Item can include food items. Avoidance or escape is to avoid or escape the adult attention or peer attention, some demands, boring tasks, settings, or activities or events. And the alone or automatic condition, that just basically means that it doesn't take another person to experience that. And so usually it's for two reasons: either to produce something sensory or to terminate an aversive. So like for sensory with stimulation would be like your vision, your hearing, smell, taste, body position awareness and movement, a sense of position in space. Those are the type of things we're talking about. And then to terminate an aversive, it could be like dirt on your hands, loud noises, pain, or stress alleviation. Sometimes self-injurious behavior is for this termination of an aversive behavior. And so I like this little quote here, that challenging behavior is a child's way to communicate and her solution to the problem. So by finding out the purpose for a behavior, we can teach children more appropriate ways to get their needs met. And we can also provide more access to those needs. So if we know that a child needs more attention, we can provide more attention throughout the day to meet that need. Or if we know that they need breaks, we can offer more breaks throughout the day. Or if we know that they need tasks broken down into smaller pieces, not pieces, but smaller increments, we could do that as well. So it's just a way to help us understand how to get their wants and needs met. So some other considerations for behavioral functions: there is nothing inherently wrong about a behavioral function. We all need these things. We all do things to get these things. We all want attention. We all need breaks. We like sensory things, listening to music, watching movies, etc. Maybe we don't like dirt on our hands, try to get rid of that. So there's nothing wrong about the behavioral function in itself. And so what may be inappropriate is how the child has determined to get their wants and needs met. That again is that their solution to getting those things that they need or they want. And so our goal as teachers are to help them understand more socially appropriate ways to get those needs met. So when I first analyzed behavior, and I have a little in our resources, I have a little paper called Some Questions that has some questions that I typically ask myself when I'm confronted with inappropriate behaviors. But the very first thing I do is I rule out any medical or biological issues. Those things always take precedence. And so is the child hungry, thirsty, tired, cold, hot? Does he need to go potty? Need a diaper change? Is he sick? Are there medicine issues? Has they had a seizure earlier in the morning and so now has lots of headaches? Does he need more processing time to understand instructions? Does he have an earache, tummy ache, etc.? You kind of get the ideas. You need to rule out those things first and help the child with those things. Also, we need to consider when to get help. So if it's a behavior that is repeatedly happening and you've tried everything you can and it's harmful to the student or to the other students or really hurting the other students' learning, you may need to reach out and get some help. So a special education teacher, a school psychologist, a BCBA, if you have one on your team. People like this are trained in behavioral functions and can help come up with a plan. Let's see. So these are some more considerations taken from this book, Addressing Challenging Behavior in Young Children from the NAUSC. And we're going to talk a little bit about trauma today. The other one I wanted to point out that was interesting to me was on gender because I had a coworker teacher who had done a lot of research into this issue. And from the book, it said, it's important to bear in mind that the majority of early childhood educators are female and thus may interpret boys' behavior as challenging when they're actually not. And so it's just important to keep in mind that developmental difference between boys and girls. And then the other one I want to point out is this cultural disconnect. This book, if you get a chance to ever read it, is really great. It's got some charts in it talking about different cultures and for example, and what they expect. And for example, with eye contact, in one culture, you need to make eye contact. In another culture, it's very rude to make eye contact. Another cultural difference would be the talking out. So in one culture, it's very important to raise your hand to answer questions and everybody take their turns to respond. But in another culture, the calling out is part of their community experience and people are just expected to call out at any time. And so you may need to do a little bit of code switching training, so like, oh, at school we behave like this, but at the same time, it also gives us, by understanding cultural differences, it gives us an opportunity to think to ourselves, well, wait a minute, maybe I can incorporate some of that in what I'm doing. So let's take the child calling out situation, if that's important to some cultural thing in your with some of your families. Maybe we have times during circle time where the children can just call out answers, or they can turn to their shoulder buddy and talk to them for a few seconds and give ideas, and then also incorporate, the raising the hand too, because that's important for, future learning in kindergarten and on up. You're going to be expected in the school setting to raise your hand and talk when it's your turn. But maybe also consider maybe implementing some of these other ideas as well. Okay, so considering trauma. Trauma causes a fight, flight, or freeze response. And the Irish Center for Learning says that common reactions to trauma are shock, disbelief, fear, sadness, guilt, shame, grief, confusion, pessimism, or anger. And it also points out that in most cases, these reactions are temporary and lessen over time, but in some cases, triggers will last a lifetime. And so I like this quote just to remind us that children who are in survival mode can be aggressive, rude, uncooperative, and inattentive. And until you help the children feel calm and safe and learn to self-regulate, you cannot focus on any other kind of learning. So this is a list from Trauma in the Young Children from the NAUSC, their book. And it makes me sad to look at this list as a whole. It's just so much. But when we look at this list, we also want to keep in mind that just because something like this has happened to an individual doesn't mean they're going to have challenging behaviors. But what we want to keep in mind is if there are challenging behaviors going on, maybe some of this is playing into it, and we need to be considerate of that. And so we just cannot undo what has happened. Um, and you may not be able to completely diminish a trigger or a fear. But what you can do is use some research-based strategies to help the child feel safe in the classroom and succeed in the classroom environment. For example, you can pair yourself with safety and trust and fun and reinforcement, and you can teach skills about how to self-regulate. You can also give choices throughout the day so that child feels more control in their temporarily out of control lives. And we're going to talk about some more ABA strategies in a little bit that can help all children, not just those who experience trauma. So we want to create an environment of safety. And so because we may not know in our classroom, like some parents might be readily not able, but want to tell you what's happened so you have an understanding, but there's going to be a lot of parents who might not tell you what's happened in their family life. And so because we may never know which of our littles have had some trauma or are going through some trauma, I think that maybe you should just consider that all of your children have had some sort of trauma and just behave accordingly. So because I think that creating an environment of safety is good for all children. So for me, when I think about creating an environment of safety, I want the children to feel safe to learn, but I also want them to feel safe to fail. And I want them to feel safe when they make mistakes so that they can learn from their mistakes and see that it's not bad to make mistakes. It's okay to spill milk. We can clean it up and we can do better. Another way that we can provide safety for our children is to separate the child from the behavior. This is really important to me because sometimes it's easy just to think of the child as the behavior, but we need to separate that. The child's worth is not based on their behavior. And so, for example, sometimes you might hear somebody say, oh, Johnny is so attention seeking. He's just so attention seeking. And then all of a sudden everybody has this, oh yeah, Johnny is just like that, this negative feeling about the child when it's actually the behavior. So if we change our wording just a little bit to say Johnny's behavior is maintained by attention, that changes the whole focus. The focus is now on the behavior, which we can work on and we can change and help him be more successful. So just maybe be a little bit mindful about how we're wording things. Also, don't talk about children's situation with people who are not working with the child. So like in the teacher's lounge or other things like that. Just try and respect the dignity of the child. And then also if you need to address inappropriate behavior with a child, try to do it privately instead of in front of a group. That would be my suggestion. All right, creating connections. I love these two quotes. They're my all-time favorite. I have them hanging on my fridge. The first one says, think of yourself as a grandmother spoiling a child, not a bulldozer going into forced learning. So I just love that. And the other one is connection is the goal, not children who behave perfectly all the time. So those are just two things I find inspiring. We just want to also remember that if a child doesn't have good role models at home, that maybe the teacher is the best role model they're going to have. So how we build that connection and what we do with them can make all the difference. And we just want the children to know that no matter how badly they behave, that we still believe in them and that we support them and we're not going to give up on them. And I know you all feel that way. So we're going to just quickly go through reinforcement and punishment. And I hope I'm doing okay on time. Okay. So the difference between the two, basically reinforcement increases or maintains a behavior and punishment decreases a behavior. So both inappropriate and appropriate behaviors can be reinforced or they can be punished. And today we're going to spend time talking about positive reinforcement. And that is where you get something as a result of a behavior that possibly increases the future rates of that behavior. So let me give you some examples of real life positive reinforcement happening in real life. So you take a bite of an apple and you get a yummy sweet taste in your mouth, and then you take another bite of the apple. So that yummy sweet taste is what is reinforcing you to take more bites of the apple. You give a kiss, you get a good feeling, you're more likely to kiss that person again. Um, Baby takes his first steps and everybody claps. Baby most likely will take more steps. Child gets a hug after helping with a chore, most likely going to help with the chore some more. Student raises her hand, gets her teacher's attention, and so there's more hand raising in the future. So punishment also happens naturally in the world around us. You touch a hot stove, you get burned, you're probably not going to touch the hot stove again. You tell a joke to your friend winces, oh, and then you're most likely not going to tell that joke again. And maybe another example would be like you walk on hot pavement in your bare feet, your feet get burned, probably not going to try that again. So if punishment is natural too, then why not use it in the classroom? Well, there's been a lot of research about this and a lot of reasons why it's not your best thing to start with. For example, it may be a quick fix, but you're not going to do really any effective behavior change with it. And then it doesn't teach the child what to do. It doesn't teach them how to behave appropriately. And it's been proven that it doesn't work in the long term. It encourages negative attitudes towards school and educators. It reduces the motivation in educators to learn other techniques. And punishment can also be reinforcing to the teacher. So because you get that quick fix, you're more likely to use punishment in the future. So that would be an increase in your rate of behavior. So it's reinforcing to you. And punishment may also teach children that it's okay to use power to control others. So here are I'm going to show you some picture of some common examples of punishment in classrooms. And we won't go through all of them. What I like to do for myself is when I'm thinking about using a procedure, I think about how would I react if I did that today? So for example, I know the sit and watch is a very popular thing to do sometimes, but what if you were in a staff meeting and you got really excited about something that the person who was leading the group was saying, and you turn to your partner and you start talking about other ideas that are related to that, and then the person who's running the meeting comes over to you and pulls your chair away from the group and says, now I want you to sit here and I want you to look and notice how everyone at the table is paying attention and they're all writing down what they have questions about, and they're not talking to their neighbor. So if it was me, if that happened to me, I would be angry and embarrassed, and I would be thinking about not so positive things. So I would just think about these things before you use them. As far as punishments as well, special ed, general ed, and behavior analysis all encourage the use of reinforcement instead of punishment. And this is a quote that I liked that I think could relate to everyone. ABA providers should keep in mind that Behavior Analysis Certification Board states that we are not to utilize punishment procedures before exhausting the use of positive reinforcement strategies unless necessary for a justifiable reasons such as safety concerns. And then the other effect of punishment is it encourages aggression and anger retaliation, escape, damaged relationships, harm to rapport building process, and behavioral contrast. Now, behavioral contrast is where the behavior decreases in one setting but increases in another. So I like this quote, where did we get that crazy idea that in order to make children do better, we need to make them feel worse? And so another quote by Dr. Miller is that we just need to have the eye on the humane piece of things and really look at this as this is a whole person that I am working with, and what we do today in this moment may affect them for the rest of their life. And so we're going to talk about positive reinforcement. Just basically, Behavior goes to where the reinforcement is. That's just all it is. Benefits of using positive reinforcement are academic, behavioral, social, and emotional. It can increase heightened enthusiasm in the classroom and a greater sense of community in the class. And so by encouraging positive reinforcement, we are reinforcing effort, and the children will feel more inclined to learn and persist with learning tasks. And so this is a great article if you'd like to read it. And I have it in the things you can download area, the presenter materials. This article is listed and it talks about positive reinforcement. So you may wonder, what about intrinsic motivation? But so we want that intrinsic motivation. We want to teach a child to read so that they enjoy loving reading. But sometimes that doesn't happen right away. So you might have to use a reading chart or a sticker chart or some sort of reward system to get that going. And so, and the other thing is that every single person in the world responds to reinforcement, whether it's the applause for a job well done or simply a paycheck at the end of the work week. And I like this quote: "We work because we get paid. We're polite to get a smile from the customer. We volunteer because we feel good helping others." So a student will be more likely to want to learn a skill or behavior if they are motivated by a pleasant consequence, such as the positive reinforcer. So what are reinforcers and how do we use them? So reinforcers can be social, such as compliments, encouragements, specific praise. They can be tokens where you earn points or you earn an item that you trade in later for something of value. They can also be tangibles, such as items or food. And we also, when we're giving out reinforcers as a result of a behavior, we want to focus on stressing the satisfaction of the job well done so that they don't become just dependent on the reinforcers. Reinforcers should be given immediately after behavior occurs, and you should vary your reinforcers so that they don't get what we call satiated on them. They're just no longer reinforcing. And if you need ideas for reinforcers, there's this link here. This is, again, in the downloading materials. All this information will be there. And there's 101 things that you can use. Now keep in mind, what you find valuable as a reinforcer may not be valuable to the child as a reinforcer. And so technically we don't really get to pick the reinforcers, because if I think this toy is going to be fun, that child might not think this toy is going to be fun. So you really kind of want to know your child's preferences that you're working with, and even maybe give them the opportunity to choose what they want to work for. The group reinforcer is like a lifesaver. When you have 15 or 16 in a class, it's really hard to just do individual reinforcement for everybody. So your group reinforcer is like the lifesaver. And there's some information about that there, but basically it's some sort of thing that the children earn. And then when everybody earns it, then they all get the big reinforcement prize, so to say. So for example, you have a little jar that you're going to put pom-poms in. And so you say to the kids, every time we all come to the rug and sit down after centers, we're going to put a pom-pom, earn a pom-pom in the jar. So every time they do, we earned a pom-pom for our jar, and they get to put them in the jar. And then when it's all done, you get a dance party at the end of the day or whatever. Try to make sure that the group reinforcer is something easily earned, that it's not going to take them days to earn it. Otherwise, it just won't be effective. And then just try to be specific and narrow down your target on your group reinforcer. You don't want to have them jump through so many hoops in order to get that pom-pom. You want them to feel like they can earn it. I'm just going to go on here. So simply put, to prevent behaviors, you need to raise your reinforcement and or lower your demands. And we'll talk about lowering demands with easy and hard tasks in a little bit later. And the way you treat errors can either help or hinder your child's progress. So as much as we would like it to be, preschool is not always sunshine and magic and rainbows. And sometimes things happen. And when these things happen, we're going to have to give some correction, but we want to do it again in a manner that's respectful to the child. So this is my favorite way to give correction. It's called the discrete trial, and you can use it for pretty much anything. The process is here. You give a clear direction. The child responds correctly or incorrectly or doesn't respond at all. If they respond correctly, you give specific praise paired with a reinforcer, and then you stop. If they don't respond correctly, you give specific feedback, and then you pause and then repeat the process again, maybe with a little prompting if you need to. So here are some examples. Jane walked to the rug. Jane walks to the rug, and you go, "Nice walking, Jane," and give her a high five. Or if you say Jane walked to the rug and Jane starts running, you say, "Oops, not quite. We use our walking feet when we go to the rug like this." And you kind of show her, let's walk to the rug together, and then repeat the process. So it seems really simple. It does take a little bit of practice, believe it or not, to remember to do that specific praise paired with a reinforcer. So, but I find it really helpful in a way to give feedback that's in a positive way. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the escalation cycle. Sorry, I'm just going to check to see what time it is because I'm not sure. Okay. So the escalation cycle. You may have seen this in some other trainings that you have. This is just one example of what it looks like. And I'm pretty sure many school districts do trainings on the escalation cycle. For me, I had a hard time remembering all this stuff, so I tried to break it down a little bit. So this is what it looks like for me. I tried to think, this is stuff I do when the children are calm. This is stuff I do when they start to escalate. This is what I do when they're in crisis mode. And these are the things I do when they start going that downward slope. And so for this first part of the presentation, we're going to focus on all the things you can do when the child is calm to prevent things from escalating. And then in part 2 of this presentation, we're going to focus on the other 3 parts of it. All right, so this is the when I'm calm section. And I like this reminder. We want to spend 95% of our time preventing the problem behavior. What we do know is that social and behavioral skills improve, academic achievement also increases. Preventative management behavior is one of the best academic instructional support strategies you can do. So let's start by looking at some really simple proactive strategies that we could do in the classroom. And the very first one is know your developmental milestones and standards. So I need a drink. Sorry, I gotta take a drink real quick. And again, I've got these resources in the materials. As a special education teacher, I am constantly in those early learning core standards. I mean, constantly thinking about those standards for writing IEP goals, meeting their targets, that kind of thing. So I'm very familiar with them. But if you're not familiar with them, please look them up because they are really, really great. And we want to use our milestones to check, just make sure that we're not asking too much or too little of the child. And our expectations do need to be high, but we also, well, as one of my coaches once put it, she said, you just want to meet them at their level and then push for a little bit more. I always like that. So an example of expectation maybe is in our preschool, we use something called the Battelle Developmental Inventory 2nd edition to help qualify or see if children qualify in special education. And they mention in there how long a typical child should be attending as far as for this inventory. So in case you don't know, the Battelle says at 3 years, they attend to one activity for 3 or more minutes for a typical child. And at 4 years, they attend to a learning task or story in a small group for 5 minutes. And so what that tells me is if I have a really long circle time, like a 7-minute circle time, that that says to me, okay, if they're 3 and they're typical, I need to be changing my activities enough times during that circle time to keep them engaged. Otherwise, I'm going to lose them pretty quick. And so it just having that in my mind and understanding that milestone just helps me as I'm planning. And so I just find that useful. As far as classroom management, we're not going to focus too much on that, but there's some resources that are really great. In the LRBI at the back, they have some classroom management checklists. You can kind of see them on your screen. It's in the environment, the behavior management, and the classroom instruction. I always found that was really helpful for me. And then also I have the routine-based support guide in the download area. That's a really fun one that I found recently that will take the routines of the day for circle time, recess time, or whatever, and it tells you what kind of things may happen during that time and gives you ideas and strategies of how to help mitigate those. And then also the Iris Center. That is supported by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. They have something called the Resource Locator, and if you click on Behavior and Classroom Management, they have 12 modules that you can choose whatever module you'd like to go through, and it has a lot of really great information. I did the classroom management one last year, and it was really, really good. So just some resources. All right, here's another strategy. We're going to be the Walmart greeter. Being a greeter, you know, it kind of seems silly to think about, but companies are paying employees to greet you at the door. So that says something, doesn't it? So one of the most important things, and I see it really well at our preschool setting, is the teacher greets the child at the door and is just welcoming, and you greet them by name and you maybe notice something interesting. Oh, I like your shoes today, or just something, and just be welcoming, a welcoming presence to preschool. So that a little bit goes a long way. Okay, we're also going to pair ourselves with reinforcement and fun. So 75% of our time with the child should be focused on pairing ourselves with reinforcement. Now that seems like a lot, but it actually is very doable. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what is pairing yourself with reinforcement? So that just means you're playing, you're interacting, you're having fun with the kids, and you're making sure that all the fun and all the good things and everything exciting about preschool is associated with you. That's just basically what it is. You're trying to create a connection with the child, that the child would rather be with you learning rather than doing anything else. And so the way you pair is just simply by playing with the child. Now you're not doing instruction or teaching with the child, and you're not placing demands on the child. You're just playing, you're making comments. You can work on increasing vocabulary, like by narrating or recasting during this time, where you just kind of, like the child says, oh, I'm playing with a car. You say, oh yeah, it's a red car. Mine's a blue car. And you guys are you've just kind of introduced them to vocabulary while you're playing. But as soon as you say blue car, that's not pairing. That is instructing. So you just want to make sure you're doing pairing during pairing time and instructing during an instructing time. Let's see. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, also during pairing time, no data taking or assessments. And so examples of when you can do some pairing is like during discovery time, where you're just on the floor playing with them. You can play with them at centers. You can play at recess. When they first come into the tables where you're working, you can play with them there. And we're going to talk about that in the next session about the teaching arc and how that can look at the table. Snack time, etc. It's just building those connections. Okay. It's also very important to teach the skills when everybody's calm. The best time for teaching is not in the moment when it's happening, but to teach them beforehand. And you'll find it, and then you can remind them in the moment, like, oh yeah, remember we talked about doing this, But one of the things we want to teach them is how to solve their own problems and how to come up with solutions. And so self-management, I think, is the ultimate goal for any education setting. And so I do have some resources in again, and that you can download, but also there are some great resources in the preschool path online under their strategies and activities. If you go into lifelong learning practices, they have lots of really good strategies as well there. Okay, let me see. Okay, also we when they're calm, we want to teach those social emotional skills. Again, there's some good ideas in that the strategies and activities section of the early learning standards has a lot of good ideas. But examples of what you would want to teach children are making and keeping friends, conflict resolution, problem solving, and play skills. And just as an FYI, there's a book called How to Reach Children with Challenging Behavior. It's by Auden and Tuttle. And they have a 9-page list of children's books that are categorized by emotional needs. So one's on if the child's dealing with anger, if they're dealing with loneliness or whatever, they have a whole bunch of lists in that. And here are some ideas for self-regulation games. There are also, you can download those as well. Okay, I need another drink, I'm sorry. All right. To me, out of everything, these are the 3 most important things that you can teach a child. You can teach them how to ask for items or activities, how to ask for help, and how to ask for a break. To me, if the child knows how to effectively do those things, that's half the battle. If they know how to do it appropriately, then they won't have to resort to other ways to get those needs met. I like this quote from Mary Barbera. It said, problem behaviors are almost always caused by an inability to make your needs known. This is true across the board. Show me a toddler or even an adult with a behavior problem, and I will show you someone who hasn't learned effectively to ask for the items, actions, or information that they want. And then Kaiser and Rominsky said, perhaps the most common skills a child with challenging behavior needs to learn are how to ask for help and how to ask for a break. Super important. Okay, we also want to teach and reinforce replacement behaviors. So the replacement behavior is something that you want the child to do instead of what they're doing. So for example, if you're at circle time and a child is yelling out in class to get your attention, you want to teach them how to raise their hand. So you teach them how to do it. Maybe everybody in circle time practices raising their hand to get your attention. And so anytime you see that child who has that issue of not being able to raise their hand, you reinforce it. Oh, thanks for raising your hand. Appreciate that. You know, something like that. And you have to ask yourself, is this really a can't do or a won't do? So if it's a can't do, you break down the skill and make it easier. And if it's a won't do, you teach these replacement behaviors that serve the same function as for their behavior, and you be sure to catch them doing it good. You catch them while they're doing it, and you just reinforce that. It's very important to remember to reinforce the replacement behavior. All right, we're going to talk about shaping. It's all about taking baby steps. I love shaping. Shaping is rewarding small gains and reinforcing the gains as they occur so children learn how to stick with the task and learn the skill. So an example would be a child learning how to walk. First they crawl and everybody applauds, and then they stand and everybody's so excited, and then they take one step. Oh my goodness, they took their first step, you know, and then they take a few steps. Look, they're taking a few steps, and then they're walking. That's the skill that we wanted. So it's just breaking down those steps and just reinforcing it all the way until they get to where they need. This is called demand fading. I have a little video that you can watch later. We won't have time. Demand fading is finding out how much the child will do before they give up, and then you only give them that much work, so you lessen the amount. So if you know that they'll only work for 2 minutes, then you're going to only have them work for 1 minute, and then you gradually increase the time that they work. Okay, offering choices. I really love this. I read a blog once that said, think of yourself as Sam I am. And so promoting choice helps children regain a sense of control over their daily lives. It helps them to express preferences and is an integral component of the ethical practice. So you just want to be offering choices all day long. Like, do you want to sit here or do you want to sit here? Do you want the red one? Do you want the blue one? Do you want, do you want to have your drink first, or do you want to not wash your hands? You wash your hands before you get a drink, but do you want your drink first or do you want your cracker? So you're just offering choices all day long. And that helps them feel a little more in control. This is a really fun graphic that our preschool head coordinator introduced our preschool, and I just want to share it with you. It's really fun, just ways that you can think about making your lessons more engaging. And I have the link in the handouts if you'd like to read more about it, but it's basically, adding something to it that'll make your lesson more engaging. So what I found personally for me, if I have some sort of movement, some sort of music, and some sort of prop, I can keep the children's attention. And so it's really important that the child does not really know that he's really working. I like that quote. The power of play. So laughter reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and helps the body fight off disease, and releases endorphins to the brain. Laughter also connects us to others in a positive way. So the most important takeaway about play for me is to be sure to play with the children who are giving you the most problems. And that just makes me teary-eyed, because if you can get them laughing, it changes the whole dynamic. I had a student once who just was so oppositional. I'd say stand up, he'd sit down. I'd say sit down, he'd stand up. I'd say come here, he'd run over there. It was really oppositional, and I asked my supervisor what I should do, and she said, oh, well, that's easy. Just try playing with them and get them laughing. I was like, really? Can it be that easy? So it took me a couple days to win him over, and we played and started having fun, and he started laughing, and then I was like his best friend. He followed me everywhere. He did everything I asked. We were buddies. I mean, like tight. We were tight. And so I just really feel like that's a powerful thing that we can do with our children who have those challenging behaviors. So have a you can do it attitude. We're going to be encouraging and focus on the successes. We're going to use the child's strengths to bolster his weaknesses, and we're going to use the child's interests to help him succeed. This is called the PREMAC principle. It's first then, and it's also known as grandma's rules. So first you eat the broccoli and then you get dessert. So that's something that you can do throughout your day. First you sit and then you get to hold the toy, that kind of thing. This one, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So this Parenting with ABA website had this wonderful thing on following instructions, and we have that handout for you to look over later. I'm just going to speed up. I see we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to be really quick here. We're going to balance easy and hard tasks. So that's just basically to help the children so they don't become frustrated. Throw in some of those easy tasks before you do some of the hard ones, and then go back to the easy ones. Just mix it up quite a bit so they can feel successful. If you have to lessen demands, do. And also use a little behavior momentum, and that's really fun. So like if you say, clap your hands, jump, spin around, now sit down. So we've done 3 easy tasks and then a harder task, and they don't even know. You've kind of built that momentum and things go well. Taking breaks or switch activities. Again, that's very important to be able to have that opportunity to take a break. Priming and pre-teaching. I wrote a little thing for the preschool scoop about priming. Priming is basically telling the children beforehand what's going to happen. And so you're that's really good if there's a change in the routine of the day in particular. So you could be like, children, our routine is changing today. Look, we usually have recess time here, but now we're going to do this instead. So it just gives them a little heads up. We're going to just celebrate every success. And we can celebrate by sending happy notes home, or we can celebrate by mentioning good things in front of the parents. Let's see, I think I just have like 2 minutes left. So I'll just go really quickly. Making a diversion. So like if the child's starting to run, you'll be like, oh, here, take this to the garbage for me. You've just diverted their path. They're like, oh, okay. And then they go over to the garbage, and you just kind of made a diversion. taking a step back, sometimes just taking a step back and observing what's really happening can make a difference. For example, one time I was running circle time and there was a little kid who I always saw kind of poke the child next to them. But when I stepped back, I actually had videoed the group and I watched it later. I realized that the child next to him was this instigator, had started the whole thing. And I was just catching the tail end of it. So I realized that it was different than what I had thought. Have some cute, catchy phrases handy. Catch a bubble in your mouth, turn on your listening ears, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. This is one of my favorites. Offer some time in instead of time out. So every child gets some time in with the teacher. We're going to skip over this part about behavior skills training. We can talk about that maybe later. And I do have some suggested readings in your take home. And these are just a list of my references. And if you ever need to contact me, this is my contact information. So I know I kind of zipped through this really quick. There'll be a little bit more information in the second one about the other parts of the cycle. But hopefully you found some of this maybe triggered some ideas that would be helpful.
Thank you, Tanya, for such a great presentation. And thank you for everyone who was able to attend for this part 1 of this session. We want to just draw some attention to the chat. We've been putting the sign-in link there. We want to make sure that everybody is able to actually click on that link and sign in so that you can get credit. Please make sure that you see that. And also the resources that Tanya has gathered and everything that she had been referring to, the links are also in the chat feature as well. So thank you for attending this session, everybody, and we look forward to part 2.
So thank you. Welcome to the second part of my presentation, Becoming the Giver of All Good Things. So just a little review in our first session, if you didn't get a chance to hear it, maybe you can listen to the recording later. We talked about why challenging behavior occurs, creating classrooms of safety, connections, and relationships, the importance of pairing, just basics of reinforcement, beginning introduction to the escalation cycle, and we started talking about preventative strategies. Okay, all right. So let's talk about avoidance and escape for a moment. Have you ever seen this in your classroom? I have every now and then. So what could avoidance or escape look like? It could look like leaving the area or the child throws himself on the floor, or he's closing his eyes or his ears, or even daydreaming is a type of escape behavior. And sometimes avoidance or just the postponement of the task is enough to maintain the behavior. So we're going to talk about how it's all about the value. So basically, you're going to look at what value the child is getting for leaving versus what the child is getting for staying. And so elopement is just another fancy word for leaving. And so if you look at it like a little fulcrum or a balance, if their value for leaving the area is more than their value of staying, they're going to leave. And so what you want to do is you want to have more weight of value on your teaching so that the child will want to stay with you and learn from you. So how do you up your value? You're going to up your value with reinforcement, like we talked about in the first section, and we're going to use more valuable reinforcers, and we're going to lessen the demands for a time. And so if we take the fun and the value out of escape, then what happens is you can allow the child to escape, and then they're going to come back because there's nothing fun out there. All the fun, all the attention, everything is with you. So that's the ultimate goal, is you want to be the one who's reinforcing. You want to be the most valuable person in the room, that the child will want to be that willing and happy learner like we talked about in the first session. So I have a really great example, and I hope this teacher doesn't mind. I won't say her name. She did a great job. I'm going to share this with you. We were called in to co-teach. The teacher of the classroom was out sick. And so the way the classroom was set up is we have a rotation system. And so children will rotate to different parts of the room. Some will go to center, some will go to what we call the work table, and some will go to like the teacher table. So I was in charge of the teacher table, and this other teacher was in charge of the work table. And we have this little girl, we'll call her Elle, that's not her real name. And she did not, well, in the past, she doesn't really she likes to run around and have people chase her. Let me just say that. And so we had gone in and I was doing the rotation and I had excused everybody to go. So all the little friends went to the centers and all the little friends went back to the teacher table and excused the little friends to go to the work table. And Elle just stood up and she went like this, like that. And she was not going. I'm not telling you. So I just went up to her and I said, well, it looks like you have a choice. It looks like you can go to the work table and have fun with your friends, or you can stay here. And so I just left and went to the teacher table. And the teacher at the work table got up to try and invite her little Elle to come to the work table. And she went to take her hand to bring her to the work table. And little Elle just threw herself on the floor and like started making a big fit. And this teacher did the best thing she possibly could. She just went, okay, and went back to the work table and played with the kids at the work table and had a lot of fun. And so I was sitting in the back of the room at the teacher table where I could see the whole room and I could see Elle, and she stood up and she folded her arms and she just kind of looked around and she kept watching, and then she looked at me and I turned my eyes away because I didn't want to look like I was giving her any attention for her behavior. And she looked away, and pretty soon she's like looking around and looking around, and she looks over at the teacher at the work table and sees all her little friends having fun at the work table, and she gets up and she walks over to the table. And to this teacher's credit, I love her response. There was no scolding. There was no, it's about time you came over here. There was nothing like that. She said, oh, Elle, would you like to join us? And Elle sat down and they all just continued working, and it was over with pretty quick. But the child learned pretty quick that the value was at the work table. That's where all the fun was. That's where her friends were. That's where the attention was. That's where the fun activity was. And she just came back to the work table. So it's basically in that situation, it was a choice. It was come and get access to all the fun things and all the excitement or not. I mean, that's pretty much what it was. So let's talk about creating that teaching oasis. So that's basically what you're trying to do. You're saying with me, it's an oasis and everything else is the desert. Now, when we first started doing Eckers, I thought, oh no, nobody's going to want to come work with me because there's so many fun things in the room. They've got the science center and the math center and the sensory center and all the centers. Why on earth would they want to come work with me at the teacher table, right? Everything was the oasis. There was nothing until I started watching what was happening with the speech department. So I'm going to brag about our speech department for a little bit. They have got this idea of creating an oasis like down. So what was happening is I would be in my classroom and one of the speech people would walk in the door, and like every child would be like, me? Can I go? Me? Are you calling on me? Me? Can I go with you? And I was like, wait a minute, this is not cool. So I even went to the speech department as a joke one time, and I said to them, you guys have got to stop being so fun because you are making me look bad. Because all my students want to go work with you and not stay with me in the classroom. And it's still that way, even in different classrooms. The speech people will walk in and the kids are like, me. But why does that work? Because if you think about it, we're in this Eckers environment, which is full of fun things, right? Everywhere you look, it's just amazing, fun stuff. Why is it that they want to leave this environment to go work with the speech people? And they have really got this idea of pairing themselves and with the activity. And so that brings us back to what we talked about in our first session about the importance of pairing. The children, objects are fun, right? But you want to create a situation where the objects are so much more fun with you, and the learning is so much more fun with you. And so that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to, I want to see if I want to do this right now or not. Okay, so We don't want to play what's called the chase game. Some of you have heard, who work with me, have heard me say that before. We're not playing the chase game. And so Robert Schramm, who does an online video, I'm going to just copy him. This is exactly what he does. And so this isn't my idea. I'm not taking credit. But he says, okay, here's the child. Here's you. You guys are having a good learning experience. And then all of a sudden the child goes, whoop, and you go, whoop, and the child goes over here. And then you go over here. And all of a sudden you guys are playing the chase game. Right? And that's not what we want. So what we're trying to get to with this idea of creating the oasis is that if they're trying to play the chase game, you guys are doing your little learning activity and the child goes, whoop, and you just go, okay, like that. And then the child's like, hey, wait a minute, what just happened here? And they come to you. And so this is what he said. This is a quote from Robert Schramm. It says, we want it where you're not chasing them to teach, they are chasing you to learn. That's the ultimate goal. You want to make the teaching setting into the child's most preferred activity. The child will not want to escape if the teaching setting is more fun than the escape condition. And again, in that Ecker situation where there's so much fun everywhere, pairing yourself and making yourself the most important thing in the room, the most important part of learning, will help that. So let's talk about what's called the teaching arc. And so I just need a sip of water, I'm sorry. So if you think about your little teaching area, if it's at a table or even circle time or whatever you're doing, where you're teaching something, if it includes attention, like by pairing and having a little bit of fun at first, and reinforcement, and fun items, especially fun items that they can manipulate or touch, and breaks, then you almost hit every single reason for functions of behavior. Remember how we talked about those functions in the first session? Again, if you haven't seen it and you need a little refresher on that, please watch that later. You've pretty much eliminated the reason to escape your teaching. So I love this quote, again, from Robert Schramm. You're starting with 100% fun. You're going to finish with 100% fun. And in the middle somewhere, you're going to get in your instructions and you're going to intermix them with hard and easy stuff. And you're going to intermix them so they don't want to avoid. So here's the steps to the teaching arc. You're going to, as he suggests, and it works well in our preschool setting. And so I'm not sure how it might work in a different setup, but it's maybe something to consider. So you start, children come to the table. Maybe you already have a really fun activity set out at the table, like I don't know what they call them, but like a pre-activity. And in this case right here, the little girl has the dinosaurs on the table. And you just do some pairing alone. You're just playing. You're not making any demands. You're not doing any instruction. You could do some narration. And remember, we talked about recasting. Get a little bit of language in there so they could hear it. But you're not making any demands on the child. And then you kind of ease into your instruction with a little bit more pairing. And then you're going to incorporate the more difficult actual learning tasks intermixed with those easy skills and more fun. Remember, we talked about easy and hard in the first session. And then before the child reaches their limit, before they get to the point where they're not going to want to do it anymore, you back off those harder tasks to the point where you're just pairing alone again and just having fun. And then you just stop. So that's just kind of the whole teaching arc. And so I could give you an example of how that would work in our preschool classroom. So one day, I had introduced at circle time that when they come to the teacher table, they get to have a block. It was kind of a big block and some dinosaurs, and they can put their dinosaur on the block or next to the block or under the block. So I was being intentional. I wanted them to work on those positional words, but I was trying to show them how fun it could be. And I say, each one of you get a block, but you're gonna have to share the dinosaurs. That's gonna be at the teacher table. So when they were excused, they go over there and they're just playing with their blocks and their dinosaurs. And then I come over and I just start playing with the blocks and the dinosaurs with them. And then, and I noticed that, oh, wow, you've got lots of dinosaurs on yours and you've got just a few on yours, just playing and having some fun. So that's our starting with fun. And then kind of ease, okay, and we're going to take this off and look what we're going to make now instead. And then I started doing the next activity. And I tried to make it a little easier by breaking down the tasks a little bit, showing them how to use what they were going to do. And we've worked it in. And then at the end, we just had fun playing again. So that's kind of how it works. Let's see. All right. So what if the child does try to escape? So now what? Well, here's the situation. We talked about we want to be the favorite teacher, right? So really, we don't want to be the aversive. I don't want to be the aversive. You don't want to be the aversive. So what are we going to do then, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to change the environment to help the child make better choices. So I have several examples. I'm sorry if I look down, I have my notes here, so I don't want to miss anything. So let's talk about different examples of when the child leaves. So let's say a child leaves to go play with trains. Like you're at circle time, the child gets up and leaves. Okay, well, there's a number of things that you could do. You could walk over and say, oh, well, you like the train, let's bring it back to the rug, and let them hold the little train at the rug. Or if you feel like that's gonna be too distracting, you can figure out a way to incorporate the train. Oh, bring the train with you. Let's incorporate it into the activity. So then teacher has the train, everybody can look at the train, we could all drive like trains, woo, woo, we could stand up, we could walk around like trains. You're just really building on that interest to help keep the child interested at staying at the circle. Okay, let's say you give an instruction and the child leaves for an item instead. So let's say you are sitting at the table and say, oh, look, touch the picture. And instead the child gets up and just goes over to the train. Let's say the train again. Well, you can follow them over and say, oh, you can play with the train, but I need you to touch the book first. And so you can let them touch the train. Hey, thanks for following my direction. Now you can play with the trains. So you've brought the book with you. They still had to follow through on, what you've told them, and then you've rewarded them for that, for doing that, and let them know that that's why they get to play with that train. Now, in the back of my head, I would be thinking, why wasn't he interested in the book I was reading? What do I need to do to make things more exciting so that next time he's at the table, he'll want to do the activity with me? Maybe I didn't have enough breaks during my activity, etc. I would just try and think that through. Let's see. Let's say the child leaves and wants you to chase him, kind of like that instance we talked about earlier. You're just going to continue playing with the other kids at the table and keep the excitement going here. You may have to get up though and block a door if they're going to bolt out the door. So I don't want you to think you just let them freely run through the room, but try not to give them a little eye contact. Just, block the door from where they're going. Maybe remind them that they could go back to the table if they want. Let's say the child leaves you because they want to be alone. So remember that alone condition we talked about where they don't really want any social interaction. Sorry about that. You need to create a situation where being with you is more fun than being alone. And you have to set that up with the pairing process like we discussed earlier. Now I'd like to give you a real life example. I had a little girl with severe autism. She could care less if I was next to her. And she loved running. Anytime she could, she would run. She loved just running. So we would be outside. That's all she would do the whole recess. Just run, 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 run. I thought, oh my goodness, that's her favorite reinforcer. Remember, we talked about how we don't get to choose what's reinforcing. This would not be my choice of a reinforcer for her, but this is what she found to be super reinforcing, was running. And I had to pair myself with reinforcement. Now, if you know me, you know I'm out of shape. So you can imagine what that was like. But when she started running, I was running with her. We would run up and down together. I was trying to pair myself with that running. And so later on in the class, I caught her glancing at me a little bit. And then she started spinning a ball. So I came over and started spinning the ball with her, trying to pair myself with her with that. And pretty soon later on, I had the ball. She came over to me and acted like she wanted me to interact with her with the ball. And we started throwing the ball and having so much fun together. So the importance of finding out what is reinforcing to them and pairing yourself with that fun and being engaging with that. You have to just create a situation where you're more reinforcing than the need to be alone. I hope that helps. Let's see. If you're at the table, you have all the fun items out, child refuses to do a direction, well, you're just like, oh, I'm just start putting all the stuff away. And then all of a sudden that's created, wait a minute, wait, don't put it away. I'll do it, that kind of a situation. So that's an option. Further hints about this is to make sure you have your Teaching Oasis set up. You want it to be like, you want the child like thinking like, is it better for me to leave the teaching environment or is it better for me to stay? Remember, it's that fulcrum thing. Another thing to think about is that maybe they don't understand the task. So you can break the task down into smaller steps. And that's also important because that will give you a chance to give them reinforcement for those smaller steps. Check your pacing and fun level. I'll make sure I'm on time here. I kind of had to speed up last time. Sorry about that. You want to create a culture by mixing those easy and hard tasks together, because you want to create a culture where if they're following instructions, it's easy and worthwhile for them. And also, again, remember meeting them at their level and just pushing a little bit more. Okay, so let's look at the escalation cycle that we introduced in the first thing. Remember, this is kind of what you typically see, and this is the only way I can remember it. So, and in our first presentation, we talked about all the great things you can do when they're calm to help prevent escalating behavior. So now we're going to focus on different types of escalation. Okay. So the message, I'm just going to read this quote. I love it, out of that Kaiser and Reminsky book that I mentioned in the earlier session. A child's challenging behavior is sending a message. The task is too difficult. The child doesn't understand the expectation. He needs your attention. The environment is too loud and chaotic. If the teachers listen carefully to the child's message, they will be able to identify the skills that he needs to learn, and ultimately they will become better teachers. So if we can just keep in our mind that behavior is a way of the child communicating to you. So this is from Wallace and Reiner. It's called the 3 Ds of Rage. And it's just an easy way to remember different things that you can do. You can diffuse, distract, or de-escalate. These are all suggestions. I would like to point out that many of you have had training with your district in how to do the escalation cycle and what they expect to see for each step of the escalation cycle. And so I'm not trying to supersede that. You should follow what your district is saying, but I'm trying to give some ideas of what could also help. So some things as the children are escalating, we just want to be sure to pick our battles and understand the value of compromise. And we want to be sure to remain calm and have a relaxed posture through everything, which is sometimes hard to do when they're escalating. So let's talk about diffuse. All right, so I have a whole list of fun things that you could do for that. You can break up the task. For an example, let's say that you've told the children to clean up, and this child is looking at all these toys they have to clean up, and they are just getting worked up over it, right? If you break that down, so the child only focuses on putting one block away, and then you give reinforcement for that. Hey, bud, good job putting that block away. Now let's do another one. If they can just focus in on making that big chaotic thing into one little thing that they can focus on and they can be successful with, then it just kind of makes it easier to do that big thing. You can offer to help with the task at hand. Let's use cleanup as the same thing. Wow, we got a lot to clean up. Can I help you clean up? And maybe that will help to diffuse the problem. You can validate and provide support and encouragement. For example, you can say, I know this is hard. I'm going to help you. So you can validate how they're starting to feel, escalating. We can utilize more frequent breaks throughout our day. And this, I like to tie this to a behavior. So it's not just a, oh, we just get a break, but it'd be like, oh, we've been working so hard on this. Let's take a break. Or, yay, we did it. We finished. Let's take a break now. You can use a mini schedule. Many of us have schedules in our classroom that, says, we're going to do opening circle and then we're going to do this and then we're going to do this. You can have a mini schedule for like the certain activity. So like maybe for opening circle, it's going to say song time, then this, then whatever you do in your circle. So they have a little mini one of the big one. So it just kind of breaks things down. You can offer some options that will help in the moment. You can be sure that you're offering choices for them. You can do a mental activity. This is really effective for diffusing the problem. It kind of pulls them out of that emotional state. So you can be like, oh my goodness, I wonder how many carbs there are. And you can start counting. Or you can start having them say the alphabet letters. Oh, well, alphabet letter, that's something that gets them thinking, that pulls them kind of out of that emotional state. I saw a teacher once, a child was escalating. She pulled out a book and said, oh, I like the red boat. What color do you like? And oh, what color is this one? So she started engaging that thought process. You can offer some cooling down time. Maybe some of us have some cozy corners. You can say, would you like to take some deep breaths? Or would you like to go to the cozy corner and relax? A lot of you have those kind of things that you can do. Let's talk about distract. So the basics about distraction is just to move attention to something, somewhere, or someone else. So that's just basically what you're doing. Oh, look over here. You're just distracting them from what's going on. You can also surprise the child by doing something unexpected or out of the ordinary, or even just all of a sudden being silly. You can use humor. You can talk about interests or something positive. I saw another teacher the other day, well, maybe it was a couple weeks ago, where the child was starting to escalate and they said, oh, is that an orange on your shirt? Just totally distracted. What? No, it just totally changed the whole trajectory of everything. You can leave the area or leave the trigger. You could remove triggers. You can want to think of triggers as a spark, that causes a fire. If you can remove the spark, then the fire doesn't start. You can use visuals. I meant to bring my visuals so I can show you. A lot of us at preschool have these little visuals of appropriate behaviors that you can show, like, oh, remember, raise your hand, as a reminder. So you can use that visual to prompt a replacement behavior skill. You can engage in jobs or diversionary activities. For example, like we had said earlier, oh, in the previous one, oh, here, go take out the trash for me. An example of that working is more for transition was I had a student once who refused to come in to recess. So I made him the one who rang the bell. And so every day he'd be like, ringing the bell. And he was like the first one lined up. So that just easily distracted him from wanting to run all over the place. So de-escalating. You can interrupt the behavior and move on. So they've started to escalate. You're like, oh, give me a high five. And they give a high five. Nice job. Let's move. Just move over to something else. You can help somebody move down the cycle to a better place physically and emotionally. So for example, you can have them do physical activities such as walking or running, sensory-based activities, mental or emotional activities such as counting, breathing, resting, talking, etc. You can ask them if they want a snack or a drink or a preferred calming activity. We're not going to engage in power struggles as they're escalating. We need to refrain from making any sort of threats or trying to establish our own authority. It's only going to make the situation worse. All right, so let's say that we have done everything we possibly can. We have all our proactive strategies in place, we've done everything. We've tried to distract, we've tried to, everything, but still the child enters crisis mode. Here we are. Oh no. Now, what do we do now? We've tried everything we can. So there are some factors that may make crisis mode more likely. Exhaustion, being hungry or dehydrated, mental health issues, medical issues, cognitive abilities, and sensory issues. That's from Walls and Ronner. Your district, it's important to notice that your district may have a plan in place for crisis. So follow that plan. So I'm just going to offer a general idea for this situation, and that's going to come from Kaiser and Rominsky book that we talked about earlier. And so the things that are suggested for this is that you interact only when necessary, and you try to maintain the safety for all involved. And really, I wouldn't remove the children from the room personally. Your district may have a different plan. I wouldn't remove everybody from the room unless there truly is a danger, because we don't want to give off the feeling that everybody's alienating this child, or this child also has the teacher's sole attention because everybody's left the room. You know, just keep the rest of the class going if possible. You do want to keep the other children safe by giving this child a little bit of space and a little bit of time to calm down. You want to position your body to be non-threatening. So the book suggests standing at an L shape and kind of looking at the child's stomach or just above their head. I personally have found that if I sit down on the floor, that just kind of helps. For some reason, that position just helps a little bit. I've also been known to lay down next to the child. And then basically all you really can do is wait it out. So this is a quote directly from the book. So I just want to say this. The safest tactic is to let the child run out of steam. This is when your body language and facial expression are important, because eye contact can inflame the situation. The instructor should look over the child's shoulder or at the child's midsection and only make eye contact when he stops to take a breath or actually tries to calm down. This eye contact should send the message to the child that he is okay and that the teacher is going to help him regain control. So I'm going to give you a couple of real life examples after our next slide. So we're just going to go on to the next slide, and then we're going to talk about some real life examples. This is the downward slope. Remember, it's like, okay, we've escalated, we're in crisis mode, and now we're starting to run out of steam and we're on that downward slope. And this is kind of what it looks like. Once cooled down, don't discuss the issue right away. It's not the time. You don't want to trigger a re-escalation at that time. You just want to use observation and support and return to activities as soon as you can. And do not engage in the trigger activity. If it's something that the child needs to learn, remember we talked about in the first session, teaching those skills that they need to learn. We're going to teach them those skills when they're calm, but not right now after they've come off of a crisis mode. The best time to review or teach the new skills is when the student is completely calm another time later. You're also going to figure out what happened and either eliminate the trigger for the next time, change your approach, or offer more support with the demand or instruction. So let's talk about some examples. Just want to check my time. Okay. All right. So the thing about the escalation cycle is this. It's this nice little cycle that goes like this. But in real life, that's sometimes not where it is. Sometimes your cycle goes like this, like straight up right away. And then it takes a long time to come down. Or sometimes it's really slow. The escalation's really slow until you get 2 hours into class and then boom, that child's entered their crisis mode. So it's not this, it's varying depending on the child and the situation. So I would like to talk about a student that we had recently who came in at crisis mode. Literally what happened was mom opened the front door, shoved the child in, shut the door. Child was screaming bloody murder, like already, right? And I was like, we are starting in crisis mode. Oh my goodness, there was nothing we could have done. And the child is turned, she's banging on the door, everything. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to try. So I tried touching her on the back. She knew me. So I tried touching her on the back and I said her name. I'm going to call her T. T, like that. And she was so mad. She just threw me up, like threw her arms back. She did not want me near her. And she's still banging on the door screaming. Oh my goodness. That was, something. So I thought, okay, we're in crisis mode. I'm just going to sit next to her. So I sat next to her and was just waiting. I kind of let her know, I'm right next to you. And I was waiting. And I was sitting there thinking, man, I wish I'm in the hallway. I wish I had something, to distract her with, once she calms down. And I hadn't brought anything with me because I hadn't thought. And that's one thing that I learned later is that maybe we should think about the areas where there might be escalation and have stuff ready just in case in those areas. And so that's a great lesson I learned 2 weeks ago. So she was, still crying, and I'm sitting there, and I turned to the secretary. I thought, I need to have something for when she starts calming down because I'm not prepared. So I asked her to stand with the child. And I said, oh, Miss Judy's going to be with you. I will be right back, T. No worries. I'll be back. I go in my little room and I get my little book called Little Monkey Calms Down. It's one of my favorite. And I come back and I sit next to her. And by now she's starting to calm down. She's no longer banging at the door, but she's still crying. She's still rocking. And I tried to touch her back and she didn't like that. So I backed off. I said, oh, I've got this book. And she didn't want that. She turned her body away. So I said, oh, I'm going to read it. So I just started reading out loud in a nice, calm voice, about little monkey and how he learns how to calm down and how everything's okay and everything. And then I turned to her and I just said, and she's starting to calm down. She really is by this point. And I say to her, it's okay to feel mad sometimes. It's just okay. And we're still friends. And to my surprise, she turned and she kind of looked at me. And I said, would you like to go to class? And she said, no. So I said, okay, that's okay. I'll just sit here. And she started fiddling with her jacket. I thought, oh, good, distractor. Here we go. So I was like, oh, it's in a knot. Would you like me to help you untie that knot? She nods her head, yes. And I untie her knot. And by the time I'm done, she's totally calm. And I said, hey, would you like to go play with me in class now? And she said, yes. Off we went to class. So just a little bit of kind of an idea of how that kind of works as they're coming down that cycle. All right, I have another example. We had a little girl who she was given the instruction to go wash her hands. She's in the classroom and she did not want to wash her hands. She started screaming. She went to the cozy corner. She was screaming at the cozy corner. So I went and sat next to her at the cozy corner and said, I'm just going to sit here. Would you like to play with these dolls? I had dolls there. And she said, no. And she starts screaming again. So this went on for a little bit. And I'm just playing for a while. And then I was trying to look for some sort of, way to connect with her. And she had wiped her hands, or her nose on her hands. And I said, oh my goodness, it looks like you wiped your boogers on your hands. We should probably go wash them. She got up with me. We went and washed her hands, which was the original instruction, right? See how that worked? And she goes in, she washes her hand. While she's washing her hands, she's actually doing a really great job at it. I start commenting on her shirt and, do you like Disney princesses? I do too. What do you like? Everything. But then she's like totally calm. She goes back into the room and she's fine. So basically, we just want to make sure that the child knows that they're still valued, even when they're having these escalations, that we're not going to abandon them. We're still friends, and we're not going to bring it up over and over later. We're just going to focus on their successes, and we're going to remember to teach those skills or figure out what happened and try and mitigate that later. So after the cycle is complete, you have an opportunity to self-reflect, preferably the next day when your emotions are calm. Yeah, that's the key. And you're going to think about, what did I learn from this experience? What can I do differently next time? Like, remember how I learned, man, I need some stuff in the hallway just in case someone comes in unhappy. What replacement behavior do I need to review with the child or to teach with the child, like we talked about in the first session? Okay, this concept here has become really important to me. It's called the zooming out. And so when you're in the middle of things, you want to zoom out, and you need to think about, or I need to think about, what was my main instruction or focus? And is it really a necessary skill or a necessary thing that I need to follow through on or not? In this particular instance. So I'd like to give you a personal example. And before I give the example, I want to preface this. I feel it's important to follow through on things, but I think that maybe we need to decide ahead of time what things we really are going to follow through on and what's important to follow through on. And so we're not going to follow through on everything all the time. And let me explain why, because that may sound weird. I'm not sure I'm phrasing it right. Let me give you an example of something that happened just the other day. Little boy, he was having a rough morning. He came in tired. His hair was disheveled. He had been hungry. He was having a rough morning. With any instruction that was given him, he was just falling apart. Well, at one point he said he needed to use the bathroom. So, okay, let's go to the bathroom. So I go with him to the bathroom. He takes care of his business, and then he's washing his hands. And he is so cute about it. We have this thing on the mirror that has the instructions to how to wash your hands. You know, it has like, turn on the water, get the soap. You know, you've seen them. They're all picture cards. You guys have seen those things. And he's following him. He's like, touch it, turn on the water. He's turning on. He's 3. And then get the soap. And he's getting the soap. Wash your hands. And he's saying it out loud. He's so excited that he's doing it. I'm like, yeah, you got this. You got this, you know, everything. We get to dry your hands. And I go to help him get the stuff, and we cannot get the paper towels out. So the instruction was dry your hands. And like, here we are, can't get the paper towels out. So I turn to the little boy and I say, that's okay. I can go get you a paper towel. I'll be right back. And he goes, no, teacher, look at me. Look what I can do. And he dries his hands on his pants. And he's just so happy about it. He goes, see, just like that. All right. So at this point, I have 2 options, right? One is to react like this. Oh, yeah, but we need to dry our hands with a paper towel. Let's go get the paper towel, right? That could be my reaction, right? Or my other reaction, the one I decided to do after zooming out and thinking, how important is it to follow through on getting a paper towel in this instant? My other reaction was, wow, I loved how you washed your hands. Let's go into class. Now, was that the most sanitary thing? No, but let me tell you how I took care of it. Because who knows where his pants have been, right? we get into the classroom and we're on our way to centers. Before we do, I said, oh, you know what? Before we play with this, we need some hand sanitizer. And then we just do it. And then we go on, right? Easy fix. I didn't have to bring up the point that we didn't use the paper towel, right? But in that moment, it was more important for a child who had had a hard day to just reinforce, you came up with a great solution, dude. Thanks for washing your hands. Let's go, right? To me, that was what was more important. So that's what I mean by being careful about what instructions you want to follow through on. Take into consideration everything. I'm not saying don't follow through on instructions, because, you know, we got to follow through on instructions. It's very important, but just sometimes following through can be an easy way out. Like, oh, they're not doing it, so we'll just make them do it, right? But let's just be more thoughtful with it and think about if things are really necessary. So I'll give you, let me see if I have enough time. I have enough time. I'll give you a couple more examples. One is ring around the Rosie. I'm just gonna tell on myself today. The children had worked really hard and had gotten their group reinforcer. Remember, we talked about group reinforcers in the and the first session. So if you want information about that, it's there. And they had worked really hard and they got their group reinforcer and they had decided that we were going to do Ring Around the Rosies. How much fun is that? So we took hands, we did ring. I told them at the beginning, we're going to do it 3 times and then we're going to sit down. So we did it 3 times. Okay. And we had a great time. And then I said, okay, now we're all done. Let's sit down. Bless his heart. One little boy, he says, no, let's do it again. And he grabs his one hand of his friend. He grabs the other hand of his other friend. And pretty soon all the kids have formed a circle and I am outside of the circle. And they have started ringing around the Rosies without me. So I have 2 options in this point, right? One is I could be like, no, we needed to sit down. I told you we needed to sit down, and I break everybody up and I make them all sit down. And that basically would undo all the reinforcement, the benefit that we had just done, right? Everything we gained, I'd end up telling everybody that's not sitting, sit down, that kind of thing. Or I could zoom out and just say, okay, my bad. I should have thought to make my transition cue as fun as the Ring Around the Rosie. And I just thought, oh, can I play too? We'll do it one more time. And we did it again. And then when we stopped, I said, let's everybody jump to our spot. And we all jumped to our spot and we sat down. So see how you can make that. You just got to kind of think ahead a little bit. I didn't in that point. But that would be another example of whether or not to follow through on an instruction. Here's one more example, and then we'll just move on. I'm just telling on myself today. So this example was that we had a little boy who needed to sit in a chair. He chose to sit in the chair. I asked him, would you like to sit on the floor or sit in the chair? I want to sit on a chair, teacher. So I gave him the chair to sit on. 2 little girls saw him sitting in the chair and they both said, I want a chair too. And they went to go get chairs. And then pretty soon everybody's trying to get chairs. I thought, well, we can all get chairs. Okay. There was a wonderful sub with me who was not happy with my choice of letting them all get chairs. And she made a comment about it. And I said, it's okay. It'll just be okay. We're just going to get chairs for this one activity. So they all bring their chairs and they all line them up where they want to sit them. And they all sit down. And I had their attention for the entire activity. They were all doing everything with me. So again, it's just thinking about that moment. Okay, am I going to go with this idea and just make it work and make it fun and, get their engagement out of it? Or am I going to, force nope, you can't all have chairs. Come sit down. This is where you sit, that kind of thing. The neat thing about that is by the second time we came back to circle, the novelty of the chairs had worn off and nobody wanted chairs again except the little boy who needed a chair. So that was a nice thing that it had worn off and we had just had a good one-time experience. So just to sum up this idea of zooming out, just think about your true objective and what your program values. Is it to follow through on the demand at all costs? Or is it to be more careful with the instructions that we give and follow through on those? Can we just be more careful and thoughtful about picking our battles is kind of what has become important to me. And maybe that might be helpful to anybody out there. So I'm wrapping up here. This is most important of all, the whole, you can't put the oxygen mask on the children until you take care of yourself first. And sometimes it's exhausting. We get tired, and that's a good thing, but we just need to take care of ourselves so that we can help take care of others. Especially if we're working with children who may have those challenging behaviors. These are some suggested readings. They're in the handout. These are my must-have favorite things and more in-depth information if you want to know more about applied behavior analysis and the principles of behavior, because I find it extremely fascinating. And I would think that anybody might find that too. And then also don't forget to sign up for the State's Preschool Scoop newsletter on their website. I find that there's some really good things there as well. These are my references. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. Just be aware that I don't answer like specific child related, like specific instances questions, because I don't work with the child. I feel like I shouldn't be commenting on how to help that particular child. But if you had general questions about anything that we talked about in the last 2 sessions, please feel free to email me. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tanya. This was an incredibly valuable presentation. Thanks for everybody who attended part 2 as well. We just want to make sure that you clicked on the link in the chat and sign in so you can get credit. And thank you so much. We'll just leave this here for a few minutes so people can have time to click on it. Thank you so much, you guys. And then you're welcome to have your lunch break, and we'll see you in the afternoon sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tanya, can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
Sorry, I was in the first session and I was writing furiously, but I didn't get fast enough. On the 3 things that you said that you need to teach the children to ask for, it was they need to be able to ask for help and ask for breaks. And what was the other one?
Yes. Sorry, I want to make sure I get it right. Tell you exactly. Asking for items that they want. And this is particularly special, especially for our little nonverbal children. That is so important to be able to ask for an item or activity that they want.
Thank you. This was great.
So I appreciate you asking. Thank you.